Hey guys, welcome back. BDCKR here. We're back with Season 12, Episode 3 of our weekly Q&A videos. To start off, I'd like to give a quick shout out, a quick thank you to Slong Dog Bob for the thumbnail for last week's Q&A for the last week's recap, sorry.
Right.
We had said last week in our Q&A that if somebody gave us a thumbnail for any of our content that we would probably use it, and we got that submission and it was good enough to use. So that is our thumbnail now. It's a little bit of a break from our sort of normal visual structure.
Our aggressively plain thumbnails.
Yeah.
But
it was good. You know, there was two things cut out, right? Like
there's two elements to it.
Yeah. It was made. It was put together. There's clearly some amount of effort put in, and it's nice. Yeah, definitely worth
highlighting,
including and highlighting.
Yeah.
There you go. Do we want to get into the team that we're seeing?
Okay, so the same way that last season was the season of the Lost Challenge characters, I've sort of made this season unofficially. I guess it'll be official once we're consistent with it, but it's unofficially my favorite teams.
Okay.
And it ties in nicely because this week is the Arkham Knight Batgirl Challenge. In last week's weekly recap video, we did Arkham Knight Batgirl, but as the sort of star of the team, which means that we actually didn't even take advantage of her most powerful ability in her passive, which is saving a teammate, because there was no other Arkham characters. So on this team, we've added an Arkham character. We've replaced Rebirth Raven with Arkham Knight Catwoman. And, you know, we love Arkham Knight Catwoman as a great, one of, if not the best, damage over time dealer.
Mm-hmm.
And now, the interesting thing for some people might be that it's not a full Arkham team. And it's worth giving up a second save from Arkham Knight Batgirl that we would get with a third Arkham teammate. And instead, and potentially increase Arkham Knight Catwoman's damage over time too. Mm-hmm. Right? Because her passive lets her generate more damage over time the more Arkham teammates or Arkham Knight teammates, I can't remember which, she has. So we're giving that up in order to have the fast tag in and tag out from Hawkgirl.
Mm-hmm.
And what I want to highlight, and you're probably going to catch this if I do the footage right, around the 10-minute mark and around the 15-minute mark, there are going to be two Blackest Night Flash teams that we beat. So in theory, an Arkham Knight Catwoman team, one of the biggest weaknesses is a team that will take her biggest strength, which is the damage over time,
and turn it against her.
Right. And despite that, because Arkham Knight Batgirl is so powerful, and because you can manage her damage over time a little bit if you don't start the special immediately and when she tags in and let the Master's Death card hits sort of finish,
mm-hmm.
then you're not stacking the damage over time. And you can see actually there's one where she's generating a huge amount of damage over time, which means more energy and more health for the opponents, the Blackest Night opponents. But we're still able to manage it because of the high damage output from her special and the way we've geared her with Quake Engine. It's a double-edged sword, right?
Mm-hmm.
Quake Engine boosts the damage potentially in a opponent without 1 bar of power. But we've given them so much power that they're, it's not lasting the effect of that is not lasting very long.
It's true.
And we're increasing the amount of damage over time that's given, but she's just strong enough to overcome it. A couple things that we have to be really careful. Part of me feels like after talking like this, we should go back to some of those commentary videos we did where we'd have some fights and break it down and explain mm-hmm. what's happening. Because one of the elements is that when she's facing one of the opponents that has Astro Harness, if you time it right, she does a huge amount of damage with her special too. And then if the last hit doesn't land, she's not doing damage over time.
Yeah.
And so she's still a decent counter against Blackest Night Flash team where somebody's got Astro Harness.
That's true. Yeah, you can skip it. There's some interesting nuances.
Yeah, just don't do in that case. You just don't do Special 1. Special 1 is unlikely to get to the next invulnerability, and you're very likely to give them a huge amount of power.
Yeah.
So
there we go. Getting into our first comment this week. This one comes from Nelly VEE, not just the letter V. 6731, and they say, I just came back from vacation at Banff National Park and I was thinking of you guys every time Canadian currency was mentioned. Also, I'm usually a lurker, but I wanted to thank you for giving me and the rest of us phenomenal quality content to look forward to every week. Keep it up. And since I'm here, so why not? I have a couple questions. First, what are your personal favorite teams, disregarding gears, and what are your favorite gear/gear combinations? Second, what are your favorite movies of all time? You can narrow it down to just a few or make a much larger list. I don't mind either way. I'm just looking for things to add to my watch list. I would love to see a letterboxd account if you have one. And so there's a lot of cool things. I like this comment a lot for a lot of reasons. It's nice. I think it's very funny for you to say, thank you for giving me and the rest of us phenomenal quality content. Like you're not trying to presume that we're doing it just for you.
Yeah.
But we'll dedicate this episode to you. Other people can watch it, but this one's yours. This one's for you if you want it.
Because Canadian currency is the only one that matters. So I'm glad some people agree with me.
Banff is beautiful. I love that whole area.
I've never been. I've heard about Banff.
So that's the Canadian Rockies, right? Yeah. It's western Alberta, like right on the edge of Alberta and BC. And there is a sort of bunch of stuff all in that area. If you're a little more east, I think, there's another national park called Waterton Lakes. Banff and Jasper National Park are really exceptionally close together. There's like a drive in between them.
Okay.
And the drive also has like ice sheets. Like it has like glacial sheets, and they're receding now, but you can still do like walks and like tours across them apparently.
Okay.
And there's some really cool stuff there. And then if you go over into the BC side, there is Yoho National Park, which is maybe having been to a lot of the different national parks in this country, maybe my favorite national park in all of Canada.
Oh, wow.
It's definitely like top.
You've been to a lot.
I've been to a lot. I've been to a lot.
Yeah.
So yeah, Banff is right near Jasper and right near Yoho. I would say I'd be interested. I know Nelly is normally a lurker and, not a frequent commenter, but I'd be interested in hearing in a non-doxing way, the stuff that you got up to in Banff, because it's very cool.
Right.
I having been to all of them, I would say that Banff is like the most like accessible one. It's like, but it's also the most touristy. So it's probably the easiest if you're staying for a while, staying with family, whatever. But it's just a gorgeous, gorgeous area.
So based on a couple clues, I'm going to assume Nelly V is American. One is because the larger majority of our viewers are American.
Yeah.
And two, they spelt favorite without the U.
Yeah,
which is very much American
and third,
spelling.
They're not used to Canadian currency all the time, because if it wasn't just for vacation and they just lived in Canada, they wouldn't be thinking about us anytime anybody mentions Canadian currency.
That's a non-Canadian clue, but that means there's a lot of options of non-Canadians.
But they don't have to be American specifically.
Right.
Okay, so I feel like you've answered the first of the questions, right? Favorite teams. We're going through them now.
Right, we're going through them now. They are spectacular in their own ways, and some of them are going to be just fun. Not because some of them will be because they are super fast, like the Flashpoint team. Some of them are because there's, I think we've talked about this before, where when you play, there's an engagement where you are in the team, so you have to be thinking of what you're doing.
Some of them are like more mechanically interesting or satisfying, like to actually do, and then some of them are more satisfying just because they're so good. Like they're pleasant. So, there's no like annoyances or roadblocks. They're so good that they kind of just roll over everything and make it a uniform experience.
Right. And they don't have to be fast, but if they are that good that you almost can't lose if you do it right, then I'm all for that too. I'm a big fan of that.
Yeah. I feel like gears and gear combination is kind of an interesting question, because to me, you have Master's Death Cart and Tattoo Totem, right?
Right.
But to me, like, I don't really have that many specific favorite gears. It's more of just utility. They match so closely with who they're on.
It's the characters, right?
And
I mean, this is part of the joy and the beauty of the game, is that they really do leverage the investment that you have. You know what? It's like TV shows. When you know the characters, they get to do so much more with the stories because they don't have to establish characters each time.
Yeah.
And so you don't waste a lot of time on just the introductions and the exposition.
Yeah.
So this is to me, is the same kind of thing. The characters are it. They have the passives, and then the gear is really just slot into.
Yeah. Because splash damage on a special one is very situationally useful, right?
Yeah.
We love it. Increased damage. I'm talking about an archetype for one character or one special in specific, but you'll be able to tell, like, increased damage on stunned or freeze, right?
Yeah.
Or just stunned is super useful, but only very situationally, right? And so those two abilities make up two gears that I love on a archetype that I like a lot.
Right.
But that's only like a couple of people, right? It's a couple
Right.
universes for one character and then a second character. And, you know, if you've listened, you'll know that I'm talking about like Batgirl and the Lobo, not Lobo,
Luchador Bane.
I was thinking LL, and I was like, why am I going Lobo? Yeah, Luchador Bane.
No, well, LB. I see LB in my mind. I'm visualizing. I say Lobo,
and I'm like
L.B. Yeah, that's Lobo.
And I'm seeing the mask, and I'm like, it's a black and white mask, and then obviously, you know, from our profile picture, I'm like Lobo. You know, the guy who's got the black and white pattern on his face.
So this is all right.
So
this is kind
I
of
was drawing the wrong connections in my head because I don't actually use Luchador Bane.
I know this is not the value because stores charge whatever they want. But I was at a flea market a couple weekends ago.
Yeah. And
we stopped by it. There's a whole sort of section on the 400 highway going north towards between Toronto and Barrie. And they had a comic store there. And I saw the Lobo miniseries, the first issue for 99 cents, and they're selling it for $50.
Oh.
So I don't know if that's actually what its value is, or they're just, this is what they charge. I mean, because it hasn't sold. Clearly, the fact that it's there means that nobody's bought it for $50.
That's true.
But it's fun to me to see comics that I recognize, and because they're so old, that even though my memories of it are associated with buying it at the store, that they're old enough that they have
they have value now.
They have some value to somebody because they're not anything you buy off the shelf.
Yeah. And so then the other part of this question that we like, every part of this one's good, but favorite movies, right? I think this is an interesting question. And you say, I would love to see a Letterboxd account if you have one. Neither of us have Letterboxd accounts.
What is it? So what's it? I'm assuming in context that this is some place where you can, it's like Goodreads where you can list a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, Letterboxd is almost exactly like Goodreads, but for movies. It lets you review stuff. You can look at people's reviews on Letterboxd. Right. For movies, but you can also have accounts, and it's a great way of like sort of tracking and star rating stuff. And I feel like, hearing this question, I've watched a ton of great movies, but I actually almost want to make a Letterboxd account. There's been a few times where I've wanted to make a Letterboxd account when people are asking for recommendations or whatever, because I just feel like I'm not remembering stuff I've seen, and I'm probably not remembering a bunch of stuff that I've seen and really, really enjoyed. So we've each composed a little list of stuff. I looked at yours first.
Yeah, and so before we get into it too, I think this is an interesting question because it's phrased correctly in a way that the question often isn't. Right? When you say, what's the best movie? That's, to me, that's the wrong question. How would I know? I don't watch enough movies, right?
I feel like some people ask best movies, but I feel like most people ask your favorites.
Yeah.
What's funny is actually Letterboxd has a little series that they do because they go to like premieres and stuff.
Yeah.
Where they'll ask actors what their 3 favorite or their 4 favorite movies are. And so you get a bunch of different lists that way. But anyways,
But your favorites, so to me, I mean, in my mind, I like to categorize stuff. I mean, maybe that's part of my neurodivergence. But so I like to categorize stuff. And when I think of favorite movies, they're not all the same kind of movies that I think of, right?
Yeah.
There's some movies I think of because I'm willing to rewatch it a lot. But then if I buy the movie, I don't feel like I have the same urgency to it because I have it and I can watch it whenever I want. And typically I end up not watching it until it shows up on TV by accident. And then I think, oh, that's a really good movie. I should watch it again. So I think a lot of it is the time of your life when you watch the movie.
Yeah.
And I think when you're younger, definitely it's easier to really form an impression of the movie that's like to really like to love a movie unconditionally in a way that's harder when you're older. Does that make sense?
I agree. Yeah. I think it's like when they do those studies and they show that like the music that people like the most was stuff that they've listened to between like it was like 17 and like 25 or something, or like 32 or whatever, where there's like a range.
That high? Part of me feels like it should start somewhere like 10 or 11 or 12.
Or I don't remember. I don't remember the actual age range, but the important part was that like, you know, if you look at it, people's favorite like songs and bands all happen to be sort of operating and releasing stuff or were exposed to them in like that period of their life. Right. Where, you know, there are times where the first time you see a movie that absolutely blows you away, it's going to be on a different level because you didn't know movies could do that.
Right.
And then the second time you did know movies could do that because it already happened once. And you maybe had a more naive wonder the world, right? So like I feel like naturally just like the thing that impacts you like that earliest is always going to be the best, in the same way that like sequels that do very similar things to like the previous movie are never as good as the first one, because it was so fresh and new and exciting on the first one.
Right.
Yeah.
So on the flip side though, when you have a recent movie that you say, oh, that's really great.
Yeah.
It feels like there's the chance that there's a bit of recency bias, right? Because it's just more fresh in your memory that you're going to think it's great. But on the other hand, because I'm old, does that mean it works? It negates the recency bias, because then it really has to be good to have left such a big impression on me.
Well, what you're describing is almost exactly the phenomenon of like memory that's been studied in psychology, where it's a U-shape. Where if you give somebody like a list of stuff to remember, and it can be any kind of list, the stuff that people remember the best is the stuff at the beginning of the list and the stuff at the end of the list.
Oh, that's funny.
You lose the middle of the list. So you're describing almost exactly that. The best stuff that you watched really early at the start of sort of your love of movie watching, or just love of media in general, and the stuff most recently, or the stuff that sticks in your head, and all the stuff in the middle kind of gets your memory scooped out more relatively.
Right.
So that sort of aligns with how our brains just work with memory. And you have to remember something to like it.
Sure.
Or to talk about it.
Well, that was the thing. Like as I was sitting there, this is one of the times where I spent a lot of time thinking about a question. Yeah. And as I sat there longer, more stuff came to mind.
Yeah. And I know there's stuff off your list, because I read your list. I didn't say some of the stuff that I might have said because it was on yours. And I said some stuff that I know you would put on your list if you had remembered it.
And the funny thing is that as I'm looking at the movies that I put on it, I realized that I'm a very sentimental kind of person.
Yeah.
Like the kind of movies that I like, or a large portion of the kind of movies I like, are very sentimental. That they make me feel something about the past, about something that's gone, that's something that you can't sort of have anymore.
Yeah.
And again, this may not be for you, but I think the movies that we're going to get into, I think do this really, really well.
Yeah. And I think one other thing that I'll say here before we get into the list is, when I was thinking about stuff, a lot of the things I was thinking about were TV shows that I really like. And to me, like books and TV shows compared to movies let you spend longer with them. Right. Let you have sort of a more ongoing and developing relationship with them over a longer period of time. Yeah. And if you really like them, there's just more of them. There's even like a really short series of TV has enough episodes. So I think it's not to say that like TV is better than movies, because I don't think that that's true. But I think the TV that I really, really love sticks with me easier than the movies that I really, really love.
Because to me, it scratches that particular itch of sentimentality better than a movie ever could. Yeah. Because a movie, I don't spend long enough with it that it's easy to feel nostalgic for last season, or the arc that the character took, or like that kind of stuff.
And I think that's also why a lot of people end up feeling nostalgic for like trilogies or series, right? Right. Because it's easier when like you've had them hit multiple times over, the course of several years. Right. That's better. And saying that now, I'm even going to add a new thing to my movie list. Okay. But why don't you start with yours? So
the first movie is The Boy Who Could Fly. It's it's a coming of age kind of movie, and it's relatively obscure. I loved it when it first came out. I watched it when I was super young, and I recognized that it's probably not the best movie. Yeah. I've watched it a few times. There's certain things that it's relatively slow paced. It has a really young Fred Savage, the kid from Wonder Years, who I guess is of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
Okay.
I think, and he was in The Princess Bride.
Yeah.
And
Princess Bride was a great movie.
Yeah.
That could have been on either of our lists.
I forgot to put that. Yeah, just realized that. So, Bonnie Bedelia was in that. She was great. Lucy Deakins, I think, was the female lead and didn't really do much afterwards. Oh, I wish Jay. He played Bug in Uncle Buck.
I don't know.
Okay, so anyways.
Some of these details are going to be less important to other people than... So
there's definitely different parts of it that are really cool. There's some good Stephen Bishop songs. He did the Tootsie theme. So there's lots of elements that make this a good movie. So it's not anything special, but I feel like it's really well done. I like it a lot. And along that vein, like other movies, like I used to love Lucas, but it was kind of ruined for me when Corey Haim mentioned all the abuse that he suffered at the hands of Charlie Sheen.
Yeah. So that's one of those ones where, like, you liked it when you watched it and you didn't have that baggage, but now that that baggage is sort of affixed to it, it would probably be a lot harder for a newer watcher.
Right. And there's a young Winona Ryder in it. And she was, like, even then I thought, oh my God, like, she was just... in my mind, I thought, oh, she's going to be a star. Mm-hmm. I mean, who knows, right? Like, in hindsight, you can always say, oh, I knew that already. Yeah. But I just remember thinking, wow.
I'll give you one more. We'll do this in sets of 3 where we'll trade back and forth.
And it's more sentimentality, but a romantic comedy. Return to Me. It's not anything special. It's not anything revelatory, but it is so well done. It's got David Duchovny, it's got Minnie Driver, and most importantly to me is Bonnie Hunt. Bonnie Hunt is hilarious. She's got a minor role in this, and she directed it. The story is, there's not much to the plot. It's a little bit contrived, but holy moly, like the performances are just so, it's such a sweet movie. Mm-hmm. And it is so, like, it makes me feel so good about life.
Yeah.
And that's it. It's life affirming.
Yeah.
And it's just got a real sweetness. Like, it's just, and Bonnie Hunt is hilarious. Everything I've seen her in, she's good. Her most famous thing is probably, Beethoven in that, there was that movie that she did with...
Maestro or whatever?
No. Beethoven with the dog. But she was also in a movie with Steve Martin, I think, where there's like a huge family. So I don't know. I can't remember. But the best stuff she did is in TV that ended up failing. Like, it was bankrolled by David Letterman. Hilarious shows. It was The Building, The Bonnie Hunt Show, all good. Didn't find their audience, and then they just fell into obscurity. Although now I can finally watch them all on YouTube.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. So I added one to the start of my list because you were saying something that you had a love for when you were a kid, but maybe didn't hold up. And I have one that I loved a lot when I was a kid. Also probably doesn't hold up, but also is kind of beloved by enough people that I think it was a lot of, like, people's kids movie that they liked. And
okay. I think
Scooby-Doo Monsters Unleashed, the live-action Scooby-Doo movie. I love that movie. I watched it a million times. One? It is, yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if Monsters Unleashed is even the right name for it. I just know it's like the first live-action Scooby-Doo movie.
Right.
And I will say that I rewatched it actually this past Halloween with friends.
You're kidding? Okay.
For like our Halloween watch.
Okay.
And I had also watched, like, we'd watched some other horror movies leading up to it, but there was people who, like, didn't want to watch horror movies as much. So one of our group watches was Scooby-Doo, and I couldn't even tell you if it was good or not from that rewatch recently.
You can't separate
because
it.
we were all laughing and joking and having a silly time. So I had a lot of fun with it again, even if, even though I would normally say I haven't watched it in years, so I couldn't tell you if it held up. I watched it again recently. I still couldn't tell you because I don't think what I got out of it was necessarily what the movie gave me.
Right.
I think a lot of what I got out of it was my memories and whatever, but it's fun,
the associations,
it's goofy,
right?
It's silly. Yeah.
Oh, and I can tell you from the flip side, because I watched it as an adult probably almost as many times as you did.
Yeah.
It was not bad. I mean, again, it wasn't anything special. It wasn't anything groundbreaking. Mm-hmm. But for what it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if we're doxing ourselves much if we just tell the story behind it. Would it be awful?
Yeah, whatever.
Okay. I mean, when you were young, like young enough to, I think were you even in school then? Maybe not. So even before you got into school, we went on a trip to Florida, and this was your first sort of travel.
Yeah.
So you wanted, at the end of the day, to be home. Mm-hmm. Totally legitimate. I feel exactly the same way, but I guess as an adult, I've learned to subsume that kind of feeling and suppress it.
Well, when you're a kid, when you want something or don't want something, it becomes everything. It's a little all-consuming in that moment, and you don't necessarily have the tools to sort of understand to tough it out.
So this was before Airbnb, and this was a place that we rented directly through some association that had a bunch of houses, and I can't even remember, but the house, they left behind this Scooby-Doo movie along with the DVD player.
Yeah.
And you love that movie.
Yeah.
And you were almost inconsolable in a way about not being able to go home, except for the fact that we told you that this was a movie that was here. We did not have it at home, although it wouldn't have been that big a deal to get it at home, which we eventually did.
Yeah.
But
for the time being, you're like, we only have it here.
We get to watch it because we're here.
Yeah. And so I just watched it over and over again.
So we all watched it over and over again. It was totally worth it. It was a lot of fun. Like it was, I mean, I don't know that I can separate it from my associations with it too, right? Because it was just, to me, it was, we were hanging out, we're watching a movie. It was, you were excited about it. Like, you know, the way kids can read a book over and over, watch a movie over and over. Like there's a joy to it that I think you lose because partly that stuff doesn't hold up, but partly because as you get older, you have other things you need to do.
Yeah.
And there's a joy to being able to be in that moment.
Yeah.
And nothing else.
There's that like post that somebody made that I forget what the context or sourcing was, but they were like, when I was a kid, I loved Shrek 2.
Yeah.
Or it was one of the Shrek movies so much, and I watched it over and over again, and I eventually memorized the whole thing.
Right.
And so there's one point where I was like getting driven home and I was really bored and I was sitting in the back seat, so I just told my mom, I'm gonna watch Shrek 2 in my head now, and then I closed my eyes and I just essentially recounted the Shrek 2 like beat for beat chronologically in real time in my head. That's what it's kind of like that, where like you don't you know, I think at past a certain age, like you just aren't motivated like that. And so I want to say that this list is going to be in no particular order. These are not like the earlier or later in the list is not I liked more.
Right.
This is one, I'm going to steal one from your list.
Right. Okay.
Which is, this is for a while. If you asked me what my favorite movie is, I would say, I don't really know. I don't know if I have one. But if you forced me to pick one, the one that I would always say is Hot Fuzz.
Oh, that was such a good movie.
Yeah, but Hot Fuzz, so it's Hot Fuzz especially. I like it better than the other ones. But I do like sort of everything Edgar Wright put out around that time. I like pretty much everything Edgar Wright has ever put out that I've watched. I don't know if I've watched everything that he has. I probably haven't, but you know, Hot Fuzz is really good. Shaun of the Dead is really good. World's End I don't like as much as the first two, and Hot Fuzz I like more than them, but they're really fun. They're clever. They're well executed. There's just a lot to love about them. They do a really good job of tone and pacing and everything else. They're just a lot of fun. And Hot Fuzz, as long as you are like okay with a little bit of like sort of little bit of cartoony violence, right? There's like little moments of like gore and violence, and you have to be okay with like a little bit of like swearing and whatever. So like basically, if you're okay with mature themes in that style, I don't think there's anybody I wouldn't recommend Hot Fuzz to. Right. Unless you really hate comedies, I guess maybe would be the other thing. Yeah. But I don't think a lot of people like hate comedies on their face. Right. So yeah, just, you know, the Cornetto trilogy, Hot Fuzz, Shaun of the Dead. Right. I love those a lot. And I they're probably not my favorite movies, but if you had asked me, there was a while where I said that they were, because it was something easy that I could stand behind, that I would feel like confident in like putting forward as a favorite. And
I'd be happy to rewatch it.
Yeah.
That's really, I mean, that's one of the important criteria.
I've rewatched them a couple times. Yeah. And then the last one I'm going to say before I shoot it back to you for another call from you is The Prestige.
That was, okay. Yeah. That feels like it's at the bottom of the U, because it might be early for you, but for me, it's not recent. Yeah. It's not when I was young, but I remember being super like blown away by it when I watched it.
I wasn't super young when I watched it anyways, but yeah, it's cool. It's just fun. The story that it tells is really interesting.
It's thoughtful. The plot twists are bang on.
Yeah, and you've rewatched it. I have. I've also rewatched it at this point. And what I will say, what I like about the plot twists is that even if you predict it, it's still satisfying, and even if you know it, it's still satisfying, right? They weave the information in, where I think it's kind of that right happy medium, where I think if you were really looking for a twist and trying to figure out what it was going to be, and going through the whole thing and looking at the themes and whatever, you could find it out. And maybe if you'd done more media analysis, it would stick out right away. Right.
But there's a huge amount of foreshadowing too. Like that's the joy, I think, when you get to rewatch it. You get to see all the elements where they say, okay, this is what's going to happen. Yeah. But you don't know it or you may not know it the first time through.
But so, whatever. Regardless, it's quite a fun movie. I liked it a lot. I liked a lot on my rewatch. And then I'll throw back to you for you hitting 3. So we'll maybe try to take a medium amount of time so we can get through our list. Let's do like 2 sentences each or something, or 3 sentences each.
All right. So there's a couple of I like Cameron Crowe movies. I think his best movie ever was Almost Famous. A close second to Say Anything. Great music movies. They both have kick-ass soundtracks. Yeah. And Almost Famous, again, there is, despite the drug use, despite the, it's a rock and roll movie. It's my favorite musical ever, maybe. And there's, despite all the kind of things the bad things that you associate with rock and roll, right? A little bit of misogyny, a little bit of, that sort of that wild behavior, that sort of a little bit reckless behavior. Mm-hmm. There's that underlying sweetness to it.
Yeah.
And I think it's the Cameron Crowe character that really makes it, because it's serious and it's dramatic, but it's still got that sense of humor and it's got that innocence to it.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Okay, so that's Almost Famous and Say Anything.
Okay. And then I'll group them together too, because I think it's James Carney who does the musical movies. Mm-hmm. So out of all the ones that he's done, I think Once is the best of the three. There's Sing Street, which I also like, and Begin Again, which I feel like is maybe the weakest of the three, but they're all really good.
Oh yeah, I liked all of them.
Yeah, but Once I think is the best, because there's it relies a lot less on plot. Like not a lot happens. It relies on the performances, and again, the two leads, very, very sweet.
I would recommend Once, but I'd also highly recommend Sing Street. That's a really good movie as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. I'm going to say one that I think you should have had on your list, which is Everything Everywhere All at Once.
That was good.
It was really good. Didn't that make you, like, emotional?
In a different way. I mean, I felt like there was, I guess...
the important part is that it's a really, really cool movie.
It is.
It's silly. It's weird. There's not a lot of other movies out there like it. I forget what the name of the directors are. The Ryans?
There's two. They both have the same name.
Yeah, I think they're called the Ryans.
Is it the Ryans? I think
something like that. Whatever.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's silly. It's funny. It's got a lot of heart. It is like, it feels like scrappy, and it was made kind of scrappy. Just super, super worth a watch in my opinion. I'm gonna say like basically everything from Jordan Peele. Since he's been directing, they've all been really good.
Okay, that's interesting to me.
Get Out, Us, and Nope. Why?
No, because it wouldn't have. In my mind, I guess I hadn't categorized his movies as a thing.
Yeah, they are, because they're all like thriller / horror. They're all a little bit. They're the Daniels.
Yes,
I just not the Ryans. Yeah. Okay. So Get Out was really good. Us was really good.
Get Out was good. I never saw Us.
Nope was really, really good.
Oh, I gotta see that
a lot.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I gotta watch that.
What I'll say is that he does a really good job with like tone and feeling. They're obviously all like kind of thinky movies, right? Like, Get Out. If you've seen all of them, I don't think any of them are super sort of masked. I think like if you think a little bit about what each one of them is about, it's pretty obvious what each one of them is about.
Right.
But to me, they're all really cool and interesting and fun, and I come out of them feeling clearly what I'm supposed to have felt. Right. They're thrillers, they're thrilling, intense, and maybe a little bit scary in moments and whatever. And so I think they're super successful for me at doing what they say on the tin.
Right.
And there's moments that are like funny in them. And then the last thing I'll say is these are recent, but I like them a lot, is the 2 Glass Onion movies that have been out so far.
I like them too.
Rian Johnson. They're fun. They're silly. They're compelling. They're thoughtful.
Yeah.
They're great. They're just nice mysteries where you're not really supposed to uncover the clues with the detective.
Right.
But if you're along for the ride, and you just kind of let yourself enjoy them, then there's a lot to love about them. Yeah.
That's your 3, right?
Okay, that's 3. Yeah, I'll give you.
So, musical. So, Streets of Fire is an interesting movie for me, because I can totally recognize that it's not the best movie. But it's interesting to me that I grew up, I love Diane Lane. In this, she was like I had the biggest crush on her. Mm-hmm. And what's funny to me that it's got a reputation as a cult classic, as an art house kind of movie, and it did a few interesting things that it's known for being the first, like the way that it did the credits at the beginning and how it made like that part of the movie. But the soundtrack was great. I bought the album on vinyl. I still have it.
Nice.
I bought it, but years before I could actually watch the movie because I was too young to get into the theaters to watch it.
That's fun.
So the only reason I loved it so much was because I saw a trailer for it in another movie we watched, and I thought, oh my God, this looks so good. And they're blaring the music from the soundtrack.
And then you listen to the songs over and over again.
I did.
Like, memorized all the songs.
I did.
Yeah.
Well, this was back in the day where the vinyl album, the sleeve, sometimes you get lucky and it would have all the lyrics on it. Sometimes it would just be nothing. Mm-hmm. And this had all the lyrics, so I could listen to
it's kind of like how Hamilton was for us, right?
Yes.
Where we listened to it so many times before we ever actually saw it.
Yes. So this is one of those ones I recognize, not a great movie, but it had a very young Willem Dafoe as the villain, and Diane Lane was amazing in this. I remember reading an interview where she said that she was so disappointed and cried because she'd taken voice lessons so she could sing, but it was all dubbed.
Oh.
All right, so
okay, I'm gonna keep us to our 3 sentences just so that. We can
so Firefly, great movie,
associated with the TV show too.
Yeah, or Serenity. Sorry, Serenity is the movie.
Yeah,
right?
Firefly's the show.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I think it's been a little bit spoiled for me by all the stuff that tainted. Yeah, that's right, by Joss Whedon, all the stuff that's come out about him.
Yeah,
and I guess along that line, the third one here would be Stardust, which is the same sort of thing. I read the book. This is one of those things where I think the movie is better than the book. Mm-hmm. It is a fun movie. Every time I see it on TV, I will either watch it through or pull out the Blu-ray so I can watch it from the very beginning. Yeah. And I guess if we're sort of fixing this in time, this particular episode, it's when all the allegations against Neil Gaiman have come out. And
pretty recently, yeah.
Yeah, so this is where I struggle again with the idea of separating the artist from the art, because I tell you what, it's not just the art. It's that the kind of books that Neil Gaiman writes shows you that he actually knows better than to do the things that he was accused of.
Yeah.
So it's not like he's just a monster, but he actually knows better and is choosing to ignore it if even any of the allegations are true. And I would like to see a primary source, or I'd love to hear him actually respond to it. But as it stands, if he's not going to respond to it, then I have to believe at least the meat of the allegations.
It's true.
And so it's a shame because he's written a lot of good things.
Yeah, this is one of those situations where we are not a court of law. The fact that we're talking about it publicly means that we do need to be a lot more careful and considerate about what we say.
Sure.
Right? If we were just having this conversation, it wasn't being posted to YouTube. Personally, you can wait and see, right? Because you are not impacting sort of any of the victims' lives or Neil Gaiman's life or anything by alone in your room, sort of isolated. But when you're stepping into the discourse, we have to believe the victims. And
I totally believe the victims.
Yeah.
So this is the problem, right? Not only I've been a huge fan of Neil Gaiman, I've got a lot of his comics. Not only do I have a lot of his books, I have an extensive collection of Coraline.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about I've got an extensive collection of Neil Gaiman books. I've got an extensive collection of Coraline, different editions of it.
Yeah.
So it's hitting me particularly hard because, I'm not defending him at all. It's just such a shame. To me, it's like Orson Scott Card in the Ender's Game.
Yeah.
It's like Marion Zimmer Bradley and Miss of Avalon.
It's really hard when somebody has provided so much positive feelings for you.
Yes.
Even when you don't know them personally, right?
Yes.
And when you have read so much of somebody's output, right, and followed them to different projects and places, that you have this connection with them, and it's painful when you have to really violently and quickly recontextualize how you feel about them and all the stuff they made, and it's just sad. There's a loss there.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, that's it. That's perfectly. It's a loss. I'm mourning a loss.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although, that is not to say that the focus is on us or our feelings, right?
It is in this show.
Yeah, it is here, but obviously we're not trying to
we're not minimizing the fact that there are real victims here. Yeah. We're just nothing really.
Yeah.
There are actually real victims.
Yeah, but regardless. Anyways, so my last 3 that I'm going to say in my list, none of these are exceptional. All of these are ones that I've either watched or talked about recently and talked about enjoying, and so I'm just going to put them here. Annihilation is another one of those interesting kind of thinky, horror thrillers. I quite enjoyed it. And it was a great chaser to it was the Dan Olsen video on Annihilation and sort of media analysis that I think watching it, like, because I remember that he had done one and I had watched it at the time.
Right.
And it was in the back of my head. And so I watched it again right afterwards. It wasn't a very long video, but it really helped sort of deepen my appreciation and understanding of it.
Right.
Because it was specifically talking about dealing with it in the sort of literal versus metaphorical and like thematic meaning of the text.
Right.
And so I think right after like that shot chaser of like, oh, here's like a framework for understanding and interpreting it. I was like, I like this. And it wasn't like a what really happened at the end kind of video. Right.
Right.
And then Arrival.
It's funny that you mentioned text because it's like Arrival. It's based on something.
A book. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I also watched Arrival pretty recently and I quite enjoyed that. It was fun and interesting and thinky.
That's the one you put on your list that I wish I'd put on mine. And see, Annihilation didn't hit me the same way. It might be because I fell asleep during it. But
well, that definitely.
But Arrival was brilliant. Like
saying I didn't like it as much. I fell asleep in the middle is like the equivalent of going like I substituted some of the ingredients in this recipe and it didn't turn out well at all. You know, I think this isn't a good recipe.
Or it could be like, well, I threw up during, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I mean,
I ate it and I threw up.
Yeah, and so I didn't really get to appreciate the full. I guess what experience of it. No, because I mean, you could say that if it had been more engrossing, I would not.
Yeah, but you fall asleep during most.
I
movies,
do. It's true. So that's not entirely fair.
I bet that you've fallen asleep on watching at least some of the movies that you have put on your list here.
100%.
The first time watching.
100%.
Anyways, So Arrival, really cool, really interesting, fun, sort of sci-fi, but like sort of technical, meaty, like dig your teeth into kind of sci-fi movie, which is quite nice.
Right.
And the last one is one that it honestly doesn't really belong anywhere near my favorites list, but it's the oldest movie that I've watched that still holds up, and I have talked about liking it recently, which is 12 Angry Men.
Right.
It's 12 people in a room talking for the whole movie, and it's got good tension, it's got good drama. It's even though it's like really old, right? It's black and white. It doesn't feel like it shows its age super strongly. You really get into it. I watched it and it didn't feel like I had to watch it for school for something.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I did.
Wow.
It was actually a psychology class on behavioral coding and research methodology from this really old school prof. And so she had a lot of not outdated, but like she felt like a lot of the stuff, like a lot of the rest of my education felt like modern, and they were very much like this as like a science. And that really felt like me, like walking into sort of like a much sort of more dated version of psychology.
Okay. So is it ironic then that she picked a black and white movie to watch, or is it the opposite of irony, that it's totally in line with the fact that she had outdated ideas, so she showed you a really old movie to prove
I don't even necessarily think outdated ideas. It's just a lot of the stuff she was talking about. I'm like, it was very much like, qualitative research and like research like methodologies and stuff like that. It was a research methodologies class, and it just felt very like old and like not how we were being taught how psychology was being done at the time. So anyways, I ended up really enjoying the movie for what it was. And I again, despite the fact that it was really old, it's not the kind of thing that I would pick up and go to. I'm not the kind of person who's like a super cinephile and I'm like, I want to understand like the history and where movies came from and whatever. So just as somebody who wants to sit down and be entertained in some capacity by watching a movie, I sat down and I was entertained.
Right.
So it's maybe surprisingly good in that sense for me, where even a lot of movies that I think were good or groundbreaking and that I might really like, will bounce me for one reason or another, or I'll feel like there has to be a caveat, or I'm watching them, because they're old and they're an important part of history. This one, I was just like, yeah, this is good. I watched it and I ended up liking it.
Right.
Yeah. And that's my list. I'll let you name yours, but we gotta go.
Oh, okay. So real quick then, I think I maybe have another two that I thought of. I'm sure there's more, but Hit and Run. Another rom-com. It's Dax Shepard, Kristen Bell.
Yeah.
Nothing groundbreaking, but really cute, really sweet, fun, well done. Who was married to Roseanne? Is it Tom Arnold? Tom Arnold was pretty good in it. Good soundtrack. And there's a cleverness and a goofiness, I think, that really sweet. And another coming-of-age movie that was really well done, The Way, Way Back. Steve Carell plays against type
Steve Carell?
Steve Carell. Plays against type. He's a bit of a dick. And he's the stepdad character. But it's again, it's a lot of fun. It's there's a nostalgia there, and what's a sentimentality again? I keep on coming back to it. It's just when I'm looking through the list of stuff that comes to mind, it's those kind of sentimental movies, but they are not syrupy, but they're just, a
little saccharine, a little sweet.
Yeah.
But not in a bad way.
No.
Yeah, it's one of those things, if you like it, you like it. So that's the kind of thing that you end up liking. You like that sort of warm, fuzzy feeling that you get.
Yeah.
And less stuff that makes you feel really bad.
Well, because life it makes me feel bad enough. There's enough going on.
I didn't love Uncut Gems, but some people really loved Uncut Gems.
Right.
Even if you found it really effective and affecting, it probably wouldn't end up on either of our lists, because that's not the kind of movie that we necessarily, like, I didn't end up finding it as, like, stressful and whatever, and I really liked, The Curse, which was done by one of the Safdies, the show, the TV show.
All right.
But yeah, so it's important to know sort of what people are going in for themselves and why they like stuff. And so you like the stuff that makes you feel nice.
Yeah.
Warm and fuzzies. Okay, cool.
Exactly.
So that's your list.
And that's our week. What a great question.
Yeah. One question, whole week. So this episode really is dedicated to you, Nelly V6731. But
Canadian visitor to Canada.
Tell us about Banff if you want. But to finish up, there's one more group of people that I will give co-dedication to for this episode, which is our lovely patrons on Patreon. Everybody else is allowed to watch, but it's not really for you. So I'd like to give also a huge thank you and welcome the viewership of Michael Devries, Irvin Ruiz, Hoshi 127, Nora Klimek, and Paolo-Cesar-Pablo-Juan on the credited level, as well as 5x5 who support us on the gratitude level. But I also would like to give a huge thank you to anybody else, even though this one wasn't for you. I'd like to still give you a thank you for hanging out and sticking around, to everybody who's watched or interacted with this video somehow. We appreciate it. It's a cool feeling that people want to sit around and listen to us talk about stuff that we care about. True. And that they maybe care about it a little bit too. So thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.
Komoda.